Welcome to our Suffolk Libraries Day Online Book Festival. As a charity, our annual fundraising day is really vitally important to us, and we are so grateful for the support and the donations that we receive. I'm Lisa, your host for this week's book festival, and tonight's author event. I couldn't be more delighted. She writes the most amazing books that are feel good and wonderful and marvellous. Welcome, Jill Mansell.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's brilliant to be here. It's lovely.
We're so lucky to have this opportunity. And I wanted to start off by asking you about that magazine article. And we spoke about it before we started. Did that change the course of your life? Did that really, is that why we're here now? Because you were inspired by that?
Well, I think pretty much. And this is what always fascinates me, how the tiniest little things can happen that you don't realise at the time, but they can change your life. And that day, I'd forgotten to take a book into work. I worked in a hospital, a neurological hospital, and I'd forgotten to take a book in. I usually read something in my lunch hour. So I wandered out into the hospital waiting room and picked up a couple of magazines. And in one of the magazines, it was a Sunday Express colour supplement magazine. And there was a piece in there about 4 women who'd transformed their lives by becoming best-selling authors. And they'd said, oh, I used to live in a horrible little flat and I could never afford a car that worked and I couldn't afford to go on holiday. And I thought, well, that sounds like me. And then they started writing and it just took off for them. And it really made me think. And I found out that there was an evening class in creative writing quite locally to me. And so I joined the evening class in creative writing. Weirdly, since then, I've discovered that 2 of my other writer friends, because I told this story at a conference, and they were writers as well. They came up to me afterwards and said that same Sunday Express magazine article inspired me to start writing as well. So isn't that amazing? And though they're only the 2 people that I met, there could have been other people that were also inspired by it. And you never know, the tiniest little thing like that can just transform your life.
I absolutely love that other people had the same experience, and then suddenly a whole new career and life. And now you're like 30 odd, more than 30 books in, which is extraordinary. And we did have a question before the event from Barbara, who said, were you ever tempted to write a different genre like crime? Like, did you always know at the beginning what kind of books you wanted to write?
I didn't, and I used to read all sorts of books, but these the women in this article were all writing romantic fiction, and I sort of thought, oh, well, that'll be easy. Instead of having to think of a really killer psychological thriller murdery plot type thing, it's just gonna be a love story, so that'll be easy. And I suppose in some ways it is, because you don't have to think of brilliant ways to murder people and not get caught. But so that was how it started. And then the writer who was running the local evening class, she wrote romance as well. So I started off trying to write for Mills and Boon because that was what she did. And that was what a couple of the other people featured in the magazine did. And I discovered that it was an awful lot harder than everybody thinks. Everybody thinks, oh, Mills and Boon, it's so sort of standardized, and it is so difficult. And they sort of, at the time, I think they were accepting 1 new book for every 10,000 submissions or something absolutely wild. I may have just made that up, but it was an absolutely huge number. And I think I wrote about 5 or 6, and Mills and Boon were very lovely in that they didn't just send it back without any comments. They would send it back and say, you can write, but you're putting too much humour into it and also not enough depth of emotion, because Mills and Boon are all about the real depth of emotion. And basically, I found that I just couldn't write without putting humour in. I did like reading Ginny Cooper's books a lot. She was also somebody that really inspired me, because I thought if you can write sort of contemporary, dramatic, loads of things happening, loads of characters. It's weird. I seem to have sort of fallen into that way of writing with lots of characters. And so I just sort of gave up trying to write the Mills and Boon and wrote the kind of thing that I was really loving, which was the Jilly Cooper type books.
And I've already been talking to Jill, like her latest book, Promise Me, is extraordinary. So when you were saying about the emotion, I was very tearful. It was absolutely beautiful book. And I really love the ending. And I wondered, Jill, when you approach your writing, do you always know where you're going to take the book when you get to the end? Or is it like, oh, I didn't know that would happen?
Well, you sort of do know who is going to end up with who of the main characters, but the rest of it, no, it's all a blur. And this week, on Monday, I started writing a new book because last week I finished writing the previous one. And so I'm at the stage at the moment, I always say it's like walking into a party full of strangers because you don't know anybody. And you don't know who they are. And I don't plan, I just sort of have a little starting point, and I have a setting. I have a rough idea in my head of where the book's going to be set, and then a really nice way of meeting the characters, and I just sort of set it off from there. There's a way of writing that I think some people have described as like car headlights in darkness. You might have a 500-mile journey and you can only see a little way ahead into the darkness with your headlights on, but that's the way you do it, and that's the kind of way I do it. I sort of think, right, what can happen in the next 10 pages, and then what can happen in the next 10 pages after that. So I just do it little bit by bit, because you never know when you're just going to get a better idea for what could happen next that would be really brilliant that you hadn't thought of before. So that's the way I do it.
I love it. When you said about like places as well, I know in the past you've set books on places you've stayed or that you've really loved. Was that the case with Promise Me?
I love driving around and exploring different places and suddenly getting this feeling of, oh yes, this is lovely. So this book, Promise Me, it's not set in Nailsworth, which is a small market town in the Cotswolds, but I went to Nailsworth and I just got the feel of the place, and everybody seemed really friendly and lovely. You know, when it's a small market town, people do know each other, and it's sort of right down in a dip. There's Cotswold Hills either side, and then it goes down into the town in the middle, but there's a big house, say, up on the hill, and you think, oh, I wonder who lives there and what it's like looking down on the town. And so I just get the feel for these places, and it's not wise ever, I don't think, for especially somebody like me to set a book in a proper place, because then people will always read the book and say, I think you'll find that from that direction you can't actually see the traffic lights at that junction. So I take a sort of a real place and I get the feel of it, and then I give it a new name and it becomes my place. So people can't tell me if I'm getting things wrong. And so that's the way I do it. And now I tend to either set my books in Cornwall, so they're more sort of seasidey, or the Cotswolds, which is where I grew up. I just love the feel and the closeness of the communities as well.
And we've had a question that's popped through from David, and you've already mentioned Cameron's just said that she just ordered Promise Me. Excellent. You will be sent to a link to at the end of this event as well, to get a copy if you haven't already. I highly recommend it. It's just wonderful. David has asked, like, how many hours, a day do you write in your yellow pad? So you've just said about starting a new book. What's that like for you?
Well, gosh, because I've been doing it for so long. So I started when I was working full time in the hospital. And then, so I was going out quite a lot then, just most nights. But so I didn't have much time to write. And then I had children, and that gave me even less time to write. I thought they'd just sleep quietly. and let me get on with it.
If only.
I know. So now I don't have to sort of do the school run or anything like that. Of course, we have the internet, which we didn't have before, which is a huge distraction for me. But I probably do 6 or 7 hours of straight writing. But then there's other things that you have to do as well, writing pieces for different sort of magazines and blogs and anything that you get asked to do. So I'm more likely to do that in the evenings. I don't know, I tend not to work at the weekends, so, but I try and do the sort of 9 to 5 thing still, roughly. And then if I really am finding it a difficult day and I can't get anything done, then I might just go out for lunch or something with a friend instead. But then I just feel so guilty that makes me more determined to get on with it the next day.
But I think sometimes you kind of need that, don't you? You need to kind of get out of it to be able to come back in and have that freshness. And I wondered, like, Jill, do you really write your books with lots of fabulous colours in by hand?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. I've got my pen here. Look at this cute, look at this. It's ink with little feet in the bottle. I've got about 50 or so inks, all different colours. And I write, this is my lovely pen that I'm writing with at the moment, fountain pen. And it just brings me joy. And every time I refill the cartridgey thing inside, I use different colour inks and just makes me happy.
I absolutely love it. I think my arm would drop off if I tried to write. I don't know how you do it. Like, how does that work when you then submit it and you've got like the
no, it does get typed up.
Then it gets someone else gets. But I love that you brought like a wonderful ritual to your writing to make it really fabulous and magical for you to have it in all these different colours.
I suppose so, yes. I mean, I obviously type when I'm sort of on social media, but I'm not a typist. I don't know where the letters are on the keyboard. I have to look at every letter. So when I first started, my mum said, oh, I'll type them up for you, because she used to be a typist. And so that was the reason why there was no sex in my books. And now my daughter's taken over and she does it. So there's even less, because she doesn't like reading about sort of me writing about things like that. But I don't mind, because it doesn't matter to me whether it's there or not. Some people prefer to read books that they know are sort of not going to have any really explicit stuff in them, because just not their cup of tea. So I'm happy to carry on as I am. So I've just finished writing the 35th book.
It's absolutely extraordinary that you keep it so fresh. And one of the things that I wanted to ask, and Vicky's also touched upon, is around the characters in the books, Promise Me. And she said that, will there be another book based on them, she's asked. And I know sometimes your characters do cameos in future books. So do we get, are you tempted to bring any of these characters in your latest published book into ones in the future? Sure. Or are you already doing it?
I'm not yet, but I'm sure it will happen. It's fun for it to happen. And it's called Easter eggs, isn't it? When people who've read all my books, they will suddenly sort of spot somebody and they say, is that so-and-so from that book? And it's really nice for them as well as for me to know, because I featured a hotel many years ago in a book called Staying at Daisy's. And I think that hotel's featured in about 4 of my books now, just as a cameo. It's just briefly, it's not the main thing. And sometimes it would be lovely to go back. But it's also lovely to start afresh each time with a whole new cast of characters. I do love that.
And I think that's really interesting as well, because a lot of authors don't like that blank page. It can be a bit daunting of like, oh my God, I've got to start from scratch all over again, and yet you obviously find it really fun to create characters. And we did have a question from Gemma who asked, were your characters based upon people you know? And I don't think you do that, but you make them feel so real and vivid and like, you know, like people you would know. It's wonderful.
Well, the weird thing is that I have absolutely no idea what my characters look like when I'm writing them. As soon as I sort of create them, I know everything about them, and I don't have to write down sort of aspects of their personalities because I just know them straight away. But I do have to write down sort of what they look like roughly because I have no idea. So I suppose when I'm I don't even know what I'm doing when I'm picturing. I think when I'm writing, I'm picturing the scene around me, and then I think I must be the character. But I never know what they look like. Even at the very end of the book, I'll still be thinking, oh, now, did she have long brown hair or short blonde hair? And so I have to have a little cheat sheet to sort of keep me straight.
And when you were saying then about you sort of feel within the characters, I've heard you talk about that before, Jill, that like they're very much, you're within them when you're writing them. And do you find that they ever do things you don't expect or misbehave, or, you know, they become real to you?
Yes, they do. And I sort of hate that because I think it sounds a little bit woo-woo and weird, but it kind of does. Well, I suppose it's just me, isn't it? I will suddenly the characters will I'll write something down that I wasn't really expecting them to say, but it's just my latest idea that, oh, that would be good if I did that. So, but it does happen. It really does happen that sometimes the characters get sort of carried away and you're sort of following them thinking, oh, what's going to happen next? I don't know. Where are you taking me? And is this a good idea or not? Because you just don't know. But
I think I read so many books and do so many interviews, and I find some of the best characters that I've read in books are ones where you're like reading it going, do you know, I think this is like a real person. Do you know what I mean? Like they're like almost talking to the writer and taking them on a journey. And in your latest book, Promise Me, I was thinking before this evening, like, who, you know, did I have a favourite character? And I think Edgar. Like, I mean, what a character as well.
It's so funny because Edgar in the book is really grumpy. He's so grumpy. And while I was writing it, I thought, is this too boring? Is this too off-putting? Is he so grumpy that it's awful? But he's funny without realising that he's being funny. And everybody is loving Edgar.
Yeah,
and also
he's a hilarious character, but like, oh my goodness, the book wouldn't be the same without him.
I know, yes, yeah. No, it's good. But I didn't know when I started that he wasn't supposed to be in the book for very long at all. Ooh. He was just supposed to be in there for the opening chapters. And then I kept thinking, oh, right, well, now he's got to do this, and now this has got to happen. And I was saying to my agent and my editor, I said, he's still alive, he's still here.
I can't get rid of him, he's sticking around.
So he took over the whole book, and I hadn't planned for that to happen at all. In as much as I do plan, I planned for him not to be there. But everybody does love him.
Oh my goodness, honestly, anyone that hasn't read Promise Me yet, do it. Edgar, oh my goodness. But like for you as a writer, Jill, how do you feel about writing from the different characters' perspective? When you're writing a book, do you have a favourite that when you start writing them, like Edgar, you're like, oh yeah, I like this. He's a great person to write from.
I don't know, and I don't sort of think about it really. The only thing that I did do, and I do take notice of Amazon reviews. I don't take notice of the Amazon reviews that say 1 star, this book had a creased cover.
I can't believe people do that.
But I think when a few people say, oh, I wish I knew more from the hero's perspective rather than all the females' perspective, I thought, oh, okay, a few people have said that, so I think maybe it's worth having a go at writing more as well from the male perspective. And it's fun to be a man. I wouldn't like to be it always, I mean, but it is fun to write from everybody's perspective.
And I think that's awesome. And one of the really fabulous things about being a writer and an author, and especially when you write standalones, Jill, where you have that blank sheet, you can come up with all these marvelous different characters who take you on a journey, as well as taking us on a journey. Now, we talked, obviously, 35th book. I mean, my goodness, it's so prolific.
I'm so old.
You're not. I think it's extraordinary. And do you find that you've got lots of notebooks and ideas for future books? Do we have many, many more to come still, where you've got lots of ideas of what you want to write about?
Well, I hope we have plenty more to come, but I don't have notebooks full of ideas. Some people do, and I'm so jealous of them. I'm jealous because then it seems like they've got the whole thing planned out. But I actually try not to think of ideas for the next book, because I love starting a book and I love finishing a book when I'm writing it, but it's those middle sort of 400 pages where I sort of think, oh no, what happens next? What happens next? But also, if I was stuck in that, we call it the saggy middle, when the writers call it the saggy middle. But if you are, oh God, I've lost my train of thought now, just trying to sort of concentrate on getting to the end of the book that you're writing. If you suddenly, out of the blue, get a fantastic idea for the next book, you're going to want to write it down quickly. And it'll make you lose interest in the one that you're doing. And you'll think, oh no, let me start that. That's going to be so much better. So I really, really make an effort not to think of ideas. And then the moment I do finish the book, the one that I've got fed up with because I've been writing it for a whole year, then I sort of describe myself as like a meerkat after that. All of a sudden, I'm up there like this, looking for ideas absolutely everywhere I go, everything on TV, anything on the internet, the whole of the internet. I'll scroll through and search for problem pages. I do feel guilty sometimes looking at problems pages in magazines.
And going, ooh, Sharon's got a problem there.
That would be handy.
Good.
That would be good.
And I find it really interesting, like as an author, you've got like a really curiosity nature where you're looking at things and going, oh, what if? And all of that's going on in your mind. Do you ever want to turn that off? Where you're like looking at articles and people and listening to bits of conversation and going, oh. Or is that quite fun?
It is quite fun. And I don't know whether everybody does this, but or if it's just writers, but every time I go on a train, I'm eavesdropping like crazy to try and see, hear interesting stories from other passengers. And everywhere I go, if I'm on the train and I'm looking past and we're going through countryside and then we see a beautiful house and cars outside and I think, who lives there? And I'll start trying to picture who lives there and who they are and what they do and what's messing up their life at the moment. And so I don't know if other people do that. I'm a nightmare in restaurants because I'm just sort of watching everybody and trying to work out who they are.
Like really observant and that curiosity of going, oh, if there's lots of cars there, are they having some sort of party?
Yes,
anything. What's happening? We've had quite a few questions come through. I'm just going to touch upon some of them. So Karen had asked, Jill, like as a child, which books and which authors were your favourites?
Oh, well, because I'm so old, they're all the old sort of classic things because there just didn't seem to be that much contemporary fiction at that time. So I read Little Women, what Katie did, the Heidi books. You're so young, you won't know what I'm talking about.
Oh no, I do.
There just didn't seem to be all the young contemporary fiction around that there is now. So I'm kind of jealous, and I do like reading them sometimes because I never experienced anything like that. Maybe it was just my mum buying me sort of old-fashioned books because they were what she knew at the time. So Little House on the Prairie, all those Little House, Laura Ingalls Wilder, wasn't it? I loved those books, and that was so different to my upbringing in a little village in the Cotswolds. She'd have sort of bears in the garden and everywhere that they lived in America, and it seemed so amazing and extraordinary. So I'm trying to think what else. I did read a lot. I was a reader. I loved going into the library, and I used to take the little the Laura Ingalls Wilder books out, sort of pretty much. I'd take them home until they were mine for a week or a fortnight, and then take them back in and get them re-stamped and take them out again, because I didn't want anybody else to have them.
And a lot of the books you're talking about, Jill, you're saying about that lovely feel-good factor that you, even now when you look back, and I have the same. Did you, like, when you're reading, when you're writing all your books, do you think about the reader? Do you think about their experience of what you're writing?
Kind of, but not a lot. I'm more invested in the characters. I mean, if I sort of said anything in the book, sometimes people take my books very seriously and think that everything my characters say are what I think. So if you get like a character is a 16-year-old who'll say, oh, my teacher's really old, she's like 37 or something. And I might get a letter from somebody saying, let me tell you, 37 is not old.
I think that's hilarious. Like that.
But when you're a teenager, you do think it's old.
Yeah.
So people take that quite seriously. And when I explain, they probably don't believe me. They think I'm probably making excuses. But I just concentrate on the writing. If my editor thinks I've written anything that would upset people, genuinely upset people, then she would. Obviously I try not to do that, but inadvertently, if I did, she would cross that out. Go, tell me, we're changing that, Jill. Stop that.
But you do as a reader of your books, you do take us on this lovely journey, and we get like really teared up. And it's, you know, when I remember reading a quote once about Spielberg saying that's why he wanted to direct films, which was to like have that emotive reaction with people. And as an artist, you've got that. As a writer, you've got this wonderful world that you're in with your marvelous pens, which I just love, and that you can create all that for us. And Carol had said that you're her favourite author. And I know it's so lovely. And she's asked, do you have a favourite author? And that again is quite tough, isn't it, sometimes, to choose?
It's really difficult because I've also got so many lovely author friends as well. I like all sorts of books. I mean, I do read, do you know what? I quite often don't read the romantic fiction when I'm writing, because it's difficult. You don't want to.
Is it like modelling in your mind when you've got
a little bit? Yes. And I went through a big phase. I had glandular fever years ago, and then I couldn't read at all afterwards. And then when the reading came back bit by bit, slowly, I couldn't read any romantic fiction. I just felt like a computer that was completely full, you know, when you have to delete whole things. But I do, I read all sorts. I read thrillers as well. I love a good psychological thriller that you can't put down. All sorts. I read a lot. I've got the new Jojo Moyes waiting for me at the moment. I've just read, I quite often only read books now that haven't come out yet because I'm sent them by the publishers. So Jo Thomas has got her next one coming out in June, I think. And so I just finished that. And that's a lovely, feel-good, foodie related book about families, and it's lovely.
Well, Amanda had asked about what books you read for pleasure, so you've covered that. Louise lovely said that it's a national pastime watching people, and I'm a bit of a people watcher, but I know people that aren't. They're not interested in what anyone else is doing around them. I'm like, how can you not be curious about that person, talking to them on the bus, and what are they arguing about? You know, like the imagination. And Vicky had asked what you're currently reading, which which was the last one you just said, Jill, that you'd read?
Well, the Jo Thomas one, I mean, she's written lots of books and they're always sort of food related, and they're usually set in different countries abroad. This one, the next one out in June, is it's actually set in South Wales, on the west coast of Wales, and it's about an ice cream maker, gelato. It's with a Welsh Italian connection, and it's just a lovely book. And as I said, I'm just about to start Jojo's book, which I can't think, it's upstairs and I can't think what the title is, but it's number 1, I think, at the moment.
And you've got lots of books in the background as well. And with you getting so many proof copies, is that nice, or do you end up with loads of them and you think, I haven't got time to read all these?
Well, exactly. You don't have time to read them all. So you really do have to sort of, quite a lot you aren't able to. And I prefer it when the publishers say, can we send you this? Would you be interested? And then I can say, you know, sorry, at the moment, you know, you're backed up, and sometimes you get sent so many. And if you read them all, you'd never have time to write a single word of your own books. So you have to be really selective and just do the best you can.
How do you choose? So like if you've got lots of them that have arrived, do you have a tendency, is it like authors that you know are going to be good books, or do you sometimes, because like, for example, I love like the covers of your books, Jill, is it sometimes that you think, oh, that looks interesting? What as a reader inspires you to read a book?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Well, I forgot to mention I really like books set in World War II as well. So I'm much more likely to read a World War II book about the SOE in France and things like that. I'm quite fascinated by those. I don't know. I mean, sometimes, well, usually you don't get the cover. Not always, anyway, when you're sent a proof copy.
Sometimes it's like with the hook just on it, isn't it? Of like the book hook, yeah.
You just read as many as you can, and try and leave some time for writing.
Well, it's a lot to juggle, isn't it? So obviously you've got Promise Me that's already out at the moment, and Susan, he said she always looks forward to your next book coming out, wanted to know when the next book is coming out, and obviously you finished that. Can you give us a date as to when we'll be able to get
it will be out next January. I am sort of contracted to do one a year, so everybody's used to my books coming out in January, and then the paperback in sort of June, July, and that's the sort of summer reading thing then for people who are going away on their holidays or staying at home on their holidays and got time to read out in the sunshine. Remember sunshine?
Yeah. It's been snowing in Suffolk.
We had the snow yesterday. We've just had rain today.
I think like when you said about taking it on holiday, we had a lot of that when we were doing the interviews during lockdown, that people found so much solace in books like yours, Jill, that are just wonderful. And when you said earlier about not having maybe the sex scenes, Karen said, like, I'd rather not have that. So you know exactly what you're signing up to. Do you ever, I mean, obviously 35 books, do you ever think of like, oh, actually I'm going to write something completely different?
I sometimes think it, but I probably wouldn't, because I think if I was going to do that, I would still have to write my kind of books. Otherwise, people would shout at me.
Yeah, fans will be like, so what is this historical novel?
I would have to work twice as fast, I think, write my normal book, and then if I really wanted to write a sort of a serial killer book, I would have to write that one really fast as well. I do have a slight hankering, but I just don't think I have the time. So, and there's so many other writers that do that so well that they don't really need me as well.
And you said when the next book's coming out, can you tell us a little bit about it and about what happens and give us a bit of a taste of what to look forward to?
I can't say too much, obviously, boringly, but Should I Tell You was my last but one, and that was set in Lanrock in Cornwall, which is my invented place that's a little bit like Loo in Cornwall, but only very slightly. But I loved writing that setting, so much so that this next book is set in the same place. So it's set by the sea in the same little town of Lanrock. And so I think there's a couple of crossover cameos, but it is mainly a whole new cast of characters.
When Jill popped that up, I did the same. Gorgeous, another amazing book by Jill. Why did you decide to go back to that place and bring those characters back to life? I love that you have.
It saves me having to think of a new place to write about. Well, when you spend all that time, hang on a minute, and I've got, everybody knows now that I have these, where are we? The little maps in the front of each book. And so it's quite complicated drawing a map of the whole town. I don't do this map. There's a proper clever person, but I give them my map and they make it more beautiful. But it takes quite a long time to work out a whole town, and so that then you're saying, oh, so how can she get to there and there in 10 minutes? No, that wouldn't work. And she's got to cross the bridge. So once you've invented a whole little town and you've enjoyed being there, it's really nice to sort of set another book in the same place. So all that difficult stuff is taken care of.
I love that. It's like going back, when we talk about books when we read when we were children and things like that, it's going back to a place that you enjoy and it's comfortable and it's feel-goody for you as the author. And, you know, we've already talked about, you start every book with a blank page. You know, you've got places and people that you sometimes cross over. But Tracy's asked, like you've already said, you have one book a year. It's a contract. What's that like for you? Do you feel pressure? And if you do, how do you manage that?
It's just like any job. I mean, when I worked in the hospital for 18 years, and that was real pressure because that was more sort of, you know, that was life and death sometimes, as in any hospital. And the work has to be done. And if other people are off sick, then you have to work harder because you've still got the same patients to deal with. And so when I hear people complaining that they only had 10 minutes for lunch, I think, you're lucky. We used to sometimes, you know, we didn't have any time for lunch or lunch breaks or coffee breaks or anything like that. So this is a different kind of pressure, but it's you can't say, it's not like going down a coal mine or something. I'm sitting on my sofa with my feet up with my fancy pens thinking, of what can happen next that would keep the reader interested. So you just have to do it and get on with it. And it's so lovely once it's done.
I love that. It's like a really practical approach. And your characters, you get really attached, as a reader, you get really attached to them. And we've already said just an extraordinary amount of books. And Louise has asked, like, how many books had you written before you gave up that day job that you felt, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the foreseeable future?
Well, I tried to write those 5 or 6 Mills and Boons while I was working in the hospital. And then I decided to write the kind of book that I wanted to read, which was more the Jilly Cooper style back then. And so I wrote that one, and then I started writing the second one, and then found out that I was expecting my daughter. So because it's very difficult when you're working in a hospital and childcare is so complicated, that I just thought, okay, let's see if we can make this work. And so it seemed like a good time to give up working in the hospital, which is very soon to be doing that. But in the end, I was lucky. It did work out. So yeah, so it was only two. But I think I'd finished the second book when I told my publishers that I was pregnant, and then I said I'm giving up work, and so I'll write full time. And the baby won't be any trouble at all. She'll just sleep quietly.
And you're like, actually, she's not doing that at all. I mean, I've got a rescue cat in the background at the moment, keeps meowing quite loudly, so apologies.
Oh,
He's very sweet, but he doesn't like it when I'm in a room without him. Well, we've talked so many amazing books, and we were looking at the most recent two. I'll just do that so you can see him on the screen. And Marion had said how much she loves the covers of your book. And so I was wondering, do you get input into that, Jill? And is it like, yes, that's exactly the kind of, or do you just leave it to your publishing house?
I leave it to the publishers because they are the experts, and there's a whole art department. They honestly, you have no idea how much background detail they go into, and they go through every single bit. I mean, I'll say, this one, I don't know. The only input I had, if I really didn't like a book cover, then obviously I would say something, but luckily I don't need to, so they're lovely. The only thing was when they changed the name the style of my name, they did the J in a different way that I really didn't like. So I said, oh, can we do it that way? And I felt really like a diva saying, oh, could we just have the J going that way instead of sort of, I don't know, I can't remember what it was now, but it was a weird curly thing. I didn't like it. And I'm so glad, because it would have been niggling away at me for years, because all the books are going to be redone with that style of my name on it. But they really sort of work on every detail. Should that little boat there be sort of slightly to one side, and should the stars be there and there? It's amazing. They work so hard to get it perfect, and it's lovely to know that they care so much about it.
Do they do the same thing with the book titles? And when you're writing them, do you have, because some authors do this, do you have like a working title, or do you just write your story and then again they package it and go, well, actually this would be a really great name for the book that encapsulates it?
No, with me, I found it really difficult, actually. When I'm writing it, I don't have a title for it. I just call it, I think the latest one with the characters Lou and Edgar, we just called it Lou and Edgar all the way through. And then when I finish writing the book, then my editor says, right, time to start thinking of a title now. And I usually send them about sort of 20 or 30 titles, and just, yes, they're lovely, but let's keep thinking.
Oh gosh, okay.
And then she'll think of some, and it's always really weird seeing the names of suggested titles, and you think, oh, I don't know, it's weird. Eventually, sometimes you can try about 50 or 60 titles before the right one approaches itself. And with Promise Me, for a while it was called something else with Promise, and I can't remember what it's called now. Make Me a Promise. No, it wasn't that, but it was something like that. And then they just said, no, actually Promise Me would be better. So it seems such a lot of work for such a small amount of words, but it is so important. And so yeah, it takes a while, but we get there in the end, and then it's done, and then the cover artist gets going, and I send in my little maps as well. So,
and the maps are amazing, and you're right, it's like, even if you write the best story in the world, if it's not packaged right, if it doesn't grasp a reader's attention on that bookshelf, because there are so many books to choose from. It's like what you said about having all these proof copies coming and going, like you never have the time to read them all. That they put so much energy into just like that one title. I find it extraordinary. But I think they're all brilliant, like all the different ones. Do you ever, when they say, oh, not sure about that, do you ever, when they say a new title, do you ever go, actually, no, I'm not sure about that? Do you send it back to them and go, no, that doesn't quite fit? Or do you just trust them as your publishing house, that they know what's going to work for the market?
We just have a dialogue. I mean, if I didn't like something that they thought of, they wouldn't choose it. Maybe years ago they would have done. I think one of mine I wasn't wild about. Sheer Mischief. I mean, that was like 30 odd years ago. I don't like that title, Sheer Mischief. But back then I didn't have any say in it. And it was a different publishing house then anyway. We just had to keep the same title, but it's not the publisher that I'm with now. So just everybody's on your side. The publisher wants the book to be as successful as they can make it to be, because that's how they make their money. So it's not as if we're sort of rivals against each other. We're all trying to do the best for
collaborative, isn't it? It's a collaborative thing where they're there to make your book even better with their editing, and have a wonderful, beautiful cover and a wonderful hook and title to kind of get readers really excited about them. Well, I just wanted to mention that Louise says that she thinks you have found the secret to everlasting youth because you do not age. So that's really lovely.
Oh, thank you, Louise.
It's really nice. We have so many lovely people coming to these events this week, and I think when you say about being too old, I think that's nonsense. I think you look amazing, and the books you write are phenomenal. And I just wanted to say, like, perfect feel good, because I read a lot of psychological crime as well, but you need a bit of balance. It's like when you said when you write, you don't read the same genre because it can be a bit much. Do you have a favourite from all the books? Oh, before I was going to go on to our last question, but Amanda has said, do you have a favourite from all the books you've written? Oh my goodness. That's a tough one.
It is a tough one, but I do have an answer. Well, it's for a reason, but Three Amazing Things About You is about organ donor transplanting between the donor and the recipient, looking at it from both sides. And I had a lot to do with that when I was working in the hospital. We used to do tests on people to see if they were going to become donors. And obviously it's a very emotive subject, and a lot of people just think, oh, gross, I could never do that. But having read Three Amazing Things About You, so many people have contacted me to tell me that they've joined the organ donor register simply because they realised what a great thing it is to be able to do that. And if you do lose, if you lose a loved one, if they're dead, they're dead. But it helps in the future to know that a part of them has gone on to help somebody else live. I mean, and that does make life easier for them, and it doesn't feel like such a waste. So that's why it's my favourite book, for that reason, because I just get so many people who've signed the organ donor register as a result of reading my book, and that made me feel as if I was doing a good thing.
That is a good thing. I think that's amazing. That's really, really lovely. I went all like, oh, I just thank you so much for this evening, Jo. I wanted to finish by asking you, like, for you, what's one of your favourite things about being an author? What do you love the most? I know, it's again like who choose, like, is it the writing and coming up with ideas, or talking to your fans, or
it's meeting the readers, or not even meeting in person. It doesn't have to be in person. I mean, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and when people say the difference that my books have made to their lives, some people have got out of abusive marriages because they've sort of plucked up the courage to do so after reading my book, and they tell me this. So it just makes you feel as if you're making a little bit of a difference, just cheering people up if they're going through a really horrible time, and sometimes cheering people up if they're not going through a horrible time. Just, it's a lovely thing to be cheered up by a book, whatever your situation. So that's what I love to be able to do, and that's what I hope I'll carry on doing.
And you do, and I love that in the world that we're in now, that people can tweet at you and tell you these things, so and then that you've made this amazing impact in someone's life and something you wrote. I mean, it's a dream. Absolute dream. So I'd just like to thank everybody who's come along live, and those of you catching up on our YouTube channel. We've tried to get through all the questions that everyone's sent through before and after, so thank you ever so much for that, everybody. We've got another free events this week, that's on our website, but very importantly, you're about to be sent to a link where you can purchase Jill's latest book, Promise Me. It's Edgar is an absolute delight. I mean, he's a nightmare, but a delight at the same time. Best character. So do check that out if you haven't already. And finally, Jill, like, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat to me this evening. Thank you.
I've really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. It's been fantastic.